Good morning, primary 6. Today, inshallah, we have the absolute value. What is the absolute value means? The absolute value is a distance between the number and zero on the number line, or it's the number of jumps from the number to zero. And this absolute value donated by two bars like this. Now, if you want to find absolute 4, so here the distance between number 4 and 0 is 4 units, or it's 4 units away from 0, or we have to jump 4 units like this to reach 0. So in this case absolute 4 will be equal 4. Okay, what about absolute negative 4? Now, the distance between negative 4 and 0 on the number line is 4 units, or the number of jumps from negative 4 to 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it will be equal 4. So absolute negative 4 will be equal 4. What about if we have negative sign outside the absolute value, like negative absolute negative 4? In this case, we will keep the negative sign which is outside the absolute value as it is, and then find the absolute negative 4. It will be equal 4. So the absolute value is just a way to turn negative number into positive number. It means that we ignore the negative sign as it's related to distance. Complete. Absolute negative 7. As we said before, that absolute value always turn negative number into positive number. So in this case, absolute negative 7 will be equal 7. Absolute 9 will be equal 9. Negative absolute 5. Now we have an extra negative sign outside the absolute value. So in this case we will keep the negative sign which is outside the absolute as it is, and then find absolute 5 will be equal 5. Then if we have negative absolute negative 2, now also we have an extra negative sign outside the absolute value, so we will drop down the negative which is outside the absolute value, and then find absolute negative 2 will be equal 2. Now we have absolute 8 plus absolute negative 8. First we have to find the result of absolute 8. It will be equal 8 plus, then we have absolute negative 8. It will be equal 8. So 8 plus 8 will be equal 60. Now we have absolute negative 6 plus absolute negative 3. First we have to find the result of absolute negative 6 will be equal 6. And then absolute negative 3 will be equal 3. Then 6 plus 3 will be equal 9. The second one, if absolute x equal 9, then x will be equal what? Here we don't have any number inside the absolute value, so x may be equal 9 or negative 9, because if you wanted to find absolute 9, it will be equal 9. But if we wanted to find absolute negative 9, it will be also equal 9. So in this case, x may be equal 9 or negative 9. If b equal absolute negative 3, then in this case, b will be equal what? Now we have to find the result of absolute negative 3. It will be equal 3. So b equal 3. Absolute 1 over 4 minus absolute negative 1 over 4. Now we have to find the result for each absolute. So here absolute 1 over 4 will be equal 1 over 4. Now we have absolute negative 1 over 4. It will be also 1 over 4. So 1 over 4 minus 1 over 4, it will be equal 0. Is 0 belong or not belong, or subset or not subset to Z? As we said before, we have a relation between element and set. So in this case, we have to use belong or not belong. Is 0 belong or not belong to Z? 0 is belong to Z. Now we have absolute 6 minus 12 over 3. First, we have to find the result of the operations inside the absolute value. Here 6 minus 12 over 3, it will be equal negative 2. So it will be absolute negative 2. It will be equal 2. Is 2 belong or not belong, or subset or not subset to Z? Now we have a relation between element and set. So in this case, we have to use belong or not belong. Is 2 belong or not belong to Z? 2 is belong to Z. The last one here, absolute negative 69. First, we have to solve this absolute value. Absolute negative 69, it will be equal 69. So now we have to use belong or not belong, or subset or not subset. Now we have a relation between element and set. So in this case, we have to use belong or not belong. So is 69 belong or not belong to Z negative? Here 69 is positive. So 69 not belong to Z negative. Now we have inverses or opposites. Here we have a number line. Assume that 0 is like a mirror. So if we are in number 2, if we wanted to find the inverses or opposites of number 2, so the image of number 2 on this mirror will be negative 2. So if we wanted to find the inverse of 4, so in this case the inverse of 4 on the mirror 0 will be negative 4. But if we wanted to find the inverse of negative 4, so the image of negative 4 will be equal 4. So in inverses or opposites, we have to change the sign. If we wanted to find the inverse of 4, so it will be equal negative 4, we have to change the sign only. The inverse of negative 4 will be equal 4, so in this case we change the sign. If we want to find the inverse of 2, so it will be equal negative 2. The inverse of negative 2, so we have to change the sign, it will be equal 2. The additive inverse of 6, as we said before, that the inverses or opposites, we have to change the sign. So the additive inverse of 6 will be equal negative 6. The additive inverse of negative 4 will be equal 4. But the additive inverse of 0 will be equal 0. Because here 0 is neither positive nor negative. So I can't change the sign of 0 because 0 is neither positive nor negative. Now we have the additive inverse of absolute 3. So first we have to solve absolute 3. It will be equal 3 because as we said before that the absolute value is always turned negative into positive. So if we have absolute 3, it will be equal 3. So the additive inverse of 3, it will be equal negative 3, because as we said before that in additive inverse we have to change the sign. If we have 3, so it will be equal negative 3. If we have negative 3, it will be equal 3. The additive inverse of absolute negative 5. First we have to find the result of absolute negative 5. As we said before, in absolute we ignore the negative sign and the result always be positive as it's related to distance. So here absolute negative 5, it will be equal 5. The additive inverse of 5, it will be equal negative 5, because we change the sign positive into negative. The additive inverse of absolute negative 12. First we have to find the result of absolute negative 12. It will be equal 12. So the additive inverse of 12 will be equal negative 12. The last one, the additive inverse of negative 99. Now we have a negative sign outside the absolute value. So we will keep the negative as it is and then find the value of absolute 99. It will be equal 99. Then we will find the additive inverse of negative 99. Additive inverse, so we have to change the sign. So in this case, the additive inverse of negative 99, it will be equal 99. Thank you.